Welcome to the Center Collaborative, Creative Solutions in Behavioral Health and Criminal Justice, brought to you by the Oregon Center on Behavioral Health and Justice Integration, which is also known as the Center. We at the Center are all about solutions. Our job in Oregon is to facilitate improvement of the system so behavioral health and criminal justice can work better together to engage people in treatment while promoting public safety. I am your host, Chris Thomas. I hold a master's degree in clinical psychology and have focused on the intersection between behavioral health and criminal justice for 20 years. Over 7 of those years were behind the walls of a maximum security prison. During this podcast, you will have the opportunity to sit in on real, in-depth conversations with experts about complex topics in a way that is both fascinating and digestible. We will focus not just on what is wrong with the system, but what is going right and how we can work together to evolve. In this episode, I have the opportunity to sit down with Judge Juliet Britton, Beaverton Municipal Court presiding judge, to discuss the trauma-informed justice practices at the Beaverton Municipal Court. We talk about the mental health liaison position at the court, a clinician in court to help provide coordination and connection to services and housing. This position has significantly lowered the court's failure to appear rate and is showing promising reduction in recidivism rates as well. We also talk about the Comfort Dog program for both court participants and for staff through a partnership with Dove Lewis. The dogs in court help increase feelings of calm and relaxation with participants who are coping with significant symptoms and trauma history. The dogs are also brought in for staff as a way to promote staff wellness within a stressful work environment. We also talk about the Beaverton Police Department's community policing program and their collaboration with the court. Police build rapport with participants in the community and take the time to have conversations with participants that support their involvement in the court and the programming offered through the court. I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Judge Britton. I think you will too. Welcome to our conversation. Judge Britton, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So I had the pleasure of meeting you when you were the executive director of the PSRB, and I was still at the Health Authority. And then I know you moved from there to this presiding judge position. Going into the presiding judge position at the Muni Court, I know that they'd had the DUI diversion court for a long time at Beaverton Municipal, but I understand you're also working on another court that you're developing.
So yes, we're very excited about expanding our specialty court opportunities for defendants. One of the first things I noticed when I took the bench was that we were seeing a lot of repeat defendants with mental illness, and the traditional way at responding to these crimes is to either have the defendant serve jail time, impose fines, and wasn't really addressing the root cause issue. So pretty much from the get-go, I formulated a work group with some of our court stakeholders and got immediate buy-in from the city leadership to develop a behavioral health court specialty court. So we've been working on that for 3 years and kind of developing it. We visited a lot of other mental health courts across the state and consulted with some of the national best practices and developed what we call the Behavioral Health Court Lite that just went live. We've just now beginning to try to identify defendants who might benefit from being connected to services with the hopes that their case will get dismissed once they complete the program.
I can imagine that your work with the PSRB really highlighted the need for these types of courts on the municipal level.
Absolutely. It was not uncommon at the PSRB that if you looked back at their criminal history, they had a long history of interaction with police as well as courts. And so I do think it's very important as far as long-term stability or the long-term prevention of crime, that working with individuals at the misdemeanor level or muni court level is one way that we can prevent future, more serious crimes from occurring. One of the first things I noticed was, unlike the PSRB, which is a very resource system, at the muni court level, it was attorneys making all these assessments and decisions about what to do on a case and trying to identify whether somebody has a mental illness or not. And I really was troubled by that because I had been for 8 years with the PSRB where there were always clinicians involved in weighing in and doing the assessments. And I just saw that that was lacking at the muni court level, which is why we partnered with Washington County to have a full-time clinician at the courthouse.
It's so exciting to hear about this program that you're putting together at the municipal court. I've been looking into municipal courts more lately and the research around them, and misdemeanors really as that gateway into the circuit courts system. But we don't really talk about that when we talk about justice reform. We usually just focus on prisons and circuit courts, but we don't talk about municipal courts, and we don't talk about that connection between showing up in municipal court multiple times for smaller misdemeanors and that translating later on into ending up in circuit court for more serious charges, and how much farther we get along if we start addressing issues at a municipal court level.
Absolutely. I mean, it's kind of common sense, I think, that if you get to addressing the mental health earlier when a person is experiencing mental illness, they're more likely to stabilize, they're more likely to not get more sick, they're more likely to establish connections with positive pro-social systems, they're less likely to be traumatized. And so we're very lucky at our level. These are low level, mostly nuisance crimes like trespass, disorderly conduct, occasionally theft. These are the low-level crimes. Often they don't have victims that are interested in participating, so that's a barrier we don't see very often in our court. We have the luxury of having time to work with these defendants, so I think that absolutely there's lots of opportunities to, at this level, to connect people with services. In the 1 year that we've had our mental health liaison, so many defendants have been served by Whitney Struess, who is a current liaison right now, that would otherwise not have necessarily been connected to services or connected to housing. It's more than just mental health services. So it's just really fantastic to see kind of where we go with this position.
Let's spend some time talking about the liaison position. I know that when I heard about it, I was really taken aback around the collaboration with muni courts and circuit courts for this position, and with behavioral health in Washington County and everything that she does. Do you want to talk about the collaboration a bit and how this program got started, and then what the liaison position is currently doing in your court?
Absolutely. I was obviously dealing with a lot of defendants with mental illness when I first took the bench, and thought, it would be very helpful to have somebody in real time that's a clinician help the judge and attorneys assess whether or not there's mental health issues or substance use issues involved in this case. And then also, instead of just referring defendants to, say, the walk-in Hawthorne clinic, or referring them to, quote, county behavioral health or mental health services, wouldn't it be great to have somebody in the courtroom who could actually meet with somebody right then and there? Both Washington County mental health director, as well as the county commissioners and the city of Beaverton counselors and mayor, all were in complete support of this collaboration. And so the city and the county are funding this position 50-50.
Wow.
Whitney is in the courthouse anytime there's court in session, which is pretty much at least 3 days a week, where she is at all the arraignments. So she's helping identify individuals that might be suffering from behavioral health or substance use disorders. She is doing assessments or quick evaluations to identify whether or not she's doing the community competency restoration evals, how you, before you send someone to the state hospital, which our court has not done in 3 years. But when competency is raised, there has to be that community restoration eval. She does those in a very quick manner. I see those usually within a few days of that being ordered. So she's increased the time that we can get those evals done. She's meeting individually one-on-one, helping people identify what their needs are and then connecting them to the various resources that are out there. If individuals previously had been in services and maybe they kind of dropped out or stopped going, she's reconnected them with their case managers and or clinicians. In the first year, she provided interventions for 215 individuals and then had what we call light contacts, so short-term single event involvement with additional 90 individuals. So almost 300 people who otherwise prior to this position would not have had that immediate connection with the clinician occurred, which is quite exciting. And we saw the benefits of that. Individuals who had mental health liaison contact had a lower failure to appear rate, for example. So normally our FTA rate is about 56%. So, over half defendants never show up for court. And that FTA rate for these individuals went down to 24%.
Wow.
In addition, Whitney has been integral in helping us establish kind of our behavioral health court procedures and policies and processes. And then, especially more recently, she's actually been a resource beyond just the court. She's been a City of Beaverton resource. So we've had individuals come to court on a traffic ticket who seem to be dysregulated. We've had people just walk up to the building that aren't even there for court, where she's been able to make some contact with them and sort of de-escalate things. I know the police have sought her assistance on contacting her regarding potential or at-risk defendants of having police contact. So people that keep having the police called on them for disturbances, who appear to be suffering from a behavioral health condition. So she's been a consultant to everyone in the city who works with individuals or has contact with individuals with mental illness. So it really has been a very broad position for the city, which I think is great.
What an amazing position. I had known about parts of it when we talked about the sequential intercept mapping that we did in Washington County recently. And I was so excited to hear about this position. But I didn't realize the second piece of that around the work that she's doing with the rest of the county with law enforcement. I'm speechless, actually, Judge Britton. The more I hear about this position and the collaboration, the more I am in awe of it. I love how quickly she is able to work with the folks coming before you and is really making sure that those handoffs and services are happening, because so often folks get referred, but if someone has enough behavioral health conditions going on, just a referral, it makes it really difficult for them to get there and follow through sometimes. So she's really doing that, connecting, and then continuing to do that collaboration.
Exactly. The next level I would like to see is having some sort of resource center in close proximity to the court, or maybe even at the city building where the court resides. Our building is multi-use, so it's not just the court, but potentially having, a resource center available, especially as we kind of expand our specialty courts, because many of these individuals are in need of a food supply. They're needing help getting their benefits turned on. They're needing housing resources. They're needing supported employment. Potentially we could have maybe a resource center or a resource fair periodically that anyone in the city could come avail themselves to. I think one of the challenges of Beaverton residents is that because the county seat is in Hillsborough, a lot of the services are in Hillsborough, and eliminating the transportation barrier, for example, by having something locally, I think really would be beneficial to our community here in Beaverton.
That is such a good point about the transportation barrier. I think folks forget that even in very urban areas, that does exist. Between Beaverton and Hillsborough, there's the Max and then there's TriMet, and people think that that kind of solves it. But there are indeed barriers with getting to services that I don't think people quite understand exist in an urban area. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Many of these individuals are highly symptomatic, very disorganized. They have no money whatsoever. They rely on handouts, so they might not even have a bus ticket or fare to go on the Max. And then, sort of getting there, they don't have phones necessarily with Google Maps to tell them to go here and there. I think that having a one stop shop just eliminates all that. And again, increases the chances that they're actually going to be able to connect with who they need to connect to. I think too that for a lot of these individuals, they view Beaverton as their home. Beaverton is their home. This is where they live, even though they might be without a home. And I think it's important that we take care of these individuals. They're residents in our community. It's a myth to think that all the criminal activity is from individuals who reside in Portland. That's just simply not true. We have many individuals in our county, in Washington County, who would like to get services close to their home.
Well, and even on a good day for folks who aren't working through lots of barriers around poverty and being able to be organized, going from town to town to get stuff done all in one day in multiple places is something that none of us want to do, right? On our best day.
Right.
And when it's an individual with that many barriers, asking someone to do that sometimes makes a task that is difficult almost impossible. So to have them all in one place that's accessible and close, I would imagine would make quite the difference.
Absolutely. I mean, if you were to ask somebody who isn't used to going to Hillsborough, for example, to do, to maybe go to one of the walk-in clinics there, and you're asking them to take one or two buses for the first time, or to navigate the TriMet, and oh, by the way, figure out how to get a ticket, doing that unassisted for somebody who's suffering from symptoms, including disorganization, confusion, paranoia. I mean, it's just not working, and it hasn't worked. That's why I think it's great to have somebody live in the courtroom who can meet with defendants immediately or at a pre-scheduled time at a location that they're familiar with and get assistance that way.
It's yet another example of how trauma-informed Beaverton Municipal Court is. The old school expectation that someone, if they really want help, they'll show up, they'll make the effort, right? And that's just not a reality with the symptomology that someone is dealing with. And so doing it in a completely different way where you're meeting someone where they are is a game changer for that person. Court's going to see a lot more improvement out of that person, right? Because they're removing barriers. It's just yet another example to me of the thinking around the Beaverton Municipal Court and meeting folks where they are in order to help support behavior change.
Let me give you a great example that just happened this morning in court. So on Monday, a defendant who has, I think, 6 cases pending did not show up for court. So the traditional way to respond to that is to issue warrants, which are very costly, both from a manpower resource perspective, but also financial. It likely would result in somebody being incarcerated until they can be heard on the warrant. But this case was flagged for behavioral health. And the liaison was able to find out that this individual actually was in the hospital and is working with that social worker to do some discharge planning assistance to get him stabilized. So hopefully he'll not pick up any new cases, and he potentially is going to be in our behavioral health court. And I'll note this is an individual who had failed to appear. I mean, his cases have been going on all summer and he's never appeared in court. But our liaison sent an email to the behavioral health team, which included myself, and said, if I can get him on video through his social worker, can we do his arraignment on video? And of course, I said, yes, absolutely. And he appeared from his hospital bed for his arraignment. You know, that would not have happened if we didn't have this liaison position sort of doing the legwork to find out are people in services and then doing some coordination. And I suspect that he's not going to miss his next hearing because he's got a team surrounding him and supporting him to try to get him back on his feet. So I really view the court as just one piece of the system that's supporting this individual. And I'm optimistic that he's going to get back on his feet and hopefully we'll get these cases dismissed if he ends up doing the behavioral health court program.
So instead of the traditional way of doing things when you didn't have a liaison, where it would just have been a warrant for failure to appear, more charges that he probably wouldn't pay, racking up money with sending someone to jail who has symptoms, and that, as we all know, is not the best place for someone who's symptomatic is to be in jail. Instead, with the liaison position, you're getting the charges dealt with. He'll probably end up in behavioral court where you're getting him into treatment while supporting public safety. So you're getting a treatment-oriented ending to it versus the traditional way of doing things.
Absolutely. And I think for him in particular, my thought is if he's in our behavioral health court, our goal is, you know what, follow the treatment plan, whatever your treatment providers are coming up with. The court isn't going to be coming up with the treatment plan. Whatever those team of clinicians are coming up with as your treatment plan, as long as you follow that, work with the team that's trying to support you, the idea is that then these cases will get dismissed. What I can appreciate is that we have a very dedicated behavioral health court team. We have the liaison, Whitney, we have a dedicated defense attorney, we have a prosecutor. You know, the prosecutor today could have said, no, you know, Judge, we want it to do the normal course, which is issue a warrant. They did not do that. They recognized that wouldn't necessarily increase public safety, right? Ignoring sort of the mental health needs of this defendant is only going to continue the cycle that we've seen all summer. From a court perspective, a judge perspective, you know, I'm going to be flexible. I mean, Whitney emailed the team after hours yesterday and said, hey, can I add this to the tomorrow morning's docket? Judges, I think, need to be a little more flexible on how to respond to this stuff. I think that it does attract certain individuals, I think, to the team who really are doers. That's number one. And also are quite comfortable thinking outside of the box because every case is different. I mean, truly, we've had 3 or 4 cases now flagged for potential behavioral health court, and each one of them have their own different issues. And we've processed the cases 4 different ways. So I think really kind of being flexible and open-minded is something that's critical to this.
That is something that I really noticed about Beaverton Municipal Court. When we were there, it was right before the pandemic hit. I think it was in January of 2020 to do a trauma-informed care training for your court. And I know we had done it at the Municipal Court Judges Association, and that's how we got invited to Beaverton Municipal Court. I was so impressed with your staff at the court and their thoughts around trauma-informed care. And then I got to hear about the comfort dogs that you have at the court and the innovative way that you are using them that most people aren't doing. I love this story, and I was hoping that you could talk about it a little bit with the comfort dogs and the collaboration with Dove Lewis.
So Dove Lewis has this wonderful program called PACT, P-A-C-T-T. It stands for Portland Area Canine Therapy Teams. And they have human dog teams that do a variety of community work, including, you know, reading to the dogs, visiting hospitals, schools, things like that, assisted living. But they also have a core group of specialty court teams where they go to various specialty courts in the Tri-County area. For several years now, we've had them come to every court session for our DUII specialty court. And it's been fantastic. I mean, we love it. And I'll tell you this, COVID doesn't stop our courtroom dog program because they continue to visit with us on our video hearings that we have, which is great. And even then, even though they're not there to pet or visit with, even having them on the screen sleeping while a judge is checking in with a participant, it's still calming to have a sleeping dog on your screen. So they're even continuing their work even through COVID, which is great.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We also, I'm sure as you can imagine, there's a lot of vicarious trauma with any criminal justice system. And so we've been sensitive to the fact that many of our court staff experience angry customers, and it can be quite stressful. We also have been working with Doug Lewis to come in and just do once a month visits with our court staff. Just providing some therapeutic break from the rather stressful work that we do has been met with great response from staff. They love it. So I highly recommend that program. They are A+ act, and we just love and support our canine court teams that come to the courthouse.
When we did the trauma-informed decision-making training for your court, that's when we heard about the dogs that come in, both for your participants and for your staff. And your staff spoke so highly of it and what a huge difference it made in their lives with the work that they do. And it really left an impression on us. We had not heard about that before. That is a really cool program and a great way to promote staff wellness that I think people don't really think about. It once again, it goes into the Beaverton Municipal Court thinking outside the box arena.
Right. And, I think the original idea came from staff themselves. They would sneak into court when we were having our DUI court, be sober court sessions. They'd sneak in and visit with the dogs. And I think the court administrator and several employees were like, oh, why don't we bring them either early to spend time with staff or afterwards? And so, yeah, we began that program, which is great. And I know there's other certified therapy dogs that do those kind of visits as well. So I think it's great for any criminal justice organization because we're all dealing with a lot of stress with what we do.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference you see in your participants in court when there is a dog present versus when there isn't a dog present?
They're calmer, they're more relaxed. Even though somebody might be doing well in the program, for many of these individuals, their muscle memory is to get very nervous when they're in court. There's that kind of negative thinking that nothing good happens when I go to court, which is one of the goals of these specialty court models is we're trying to change that experience, right? These check-in meetings with the judges are meant for opportunities for the judge or who's kind of the figurehead of the criminal justice court system to provide some positive feedback to these individuals. And so it supports that philosophy of what the goal of that court session is, which is this is the time to relax. This is the time to celebrate the accomplishments you've done since we've last met. And, we all know the physical benefits of petting a dog, right? I mean, there's physical benefits that have been studied about that. And so I think it helps kind of support that culture that we're trying to establish there in the courtroom at that particular moment.
Another piece that we wanted to talk about was the collaboration between law enforcement and the court. And we talked about that a little bit earlier with the liaison position and her being available. Would you like to chat about that a little bit more?
It's interesting how when you start like your own little program, like in my case, my project has been this behavioral health court, right? Let's set up a team. Let's get folks in the program. And I hadn't really contemplated much police involvement on those particular cases. But then once the word got out that we're developing it, we're up and running, this is how we're going to take referrals, which is from anywhere. Anyone can refer a person to behavioral health court. All of a sudden, we started seeing all the great work that our Beaverton police officers are doing with these individuals prior to any citation being issued. I mean, there's a lot of work. I mean, we've all known this for years, is that, police often are first responders to individuals with mental illness and are really doing this great work at trying to connect people right off the bat to services. And so now we're getting referrals from police when they think somebody might be a good candidate. They're letting us know. And as we all know, the earlier we know about things, the better. And so we also have some police resources that, particularly among the police officers who are doing a lot of the community policing program, they have, for example, a bike program where the officers are on bikes, not vehicles. They're assigned to the downtown Beaverton Court area, where a lot of our houseless population resides. And they know these people. They have some rapport with these individuals, and so they're reminding people about their upcoming court dates. In one case, there was a individual who was really paranoid about coming to court, and one of the officers who has some good rapport with her really encouraged her to come to court and kind of told her about this program, how we're really looking to get you into services, and that's the goal of this program. And was able to actually end up convincing her to come to court and facilitated the transportation as well, which is fantastic. As we talked earlier, that's a barrier for many of these folks. So there's a lot of good work. And it's interesting how, you develop this program and then others get wind of it and then just sort of naturally start supporting the program. So already we've seen in the short time we've had the behavioral health court police supporting our program by identifying individuals for us that might be good candidates and then facilitating communication and reminders, for example. It's been great work, and it's been an unexpected surprise. I can tell you this, that I have not been met with any resistance from any department, any of the leadership, both at county and city, on trying to address these issues. It's great to have that collaboration.
And then also agencies, it sounds like not only is there no resistance, but also going above and beyond by, for example, the bike patrol officers not only taking the time to remind someone that they had a court date, but then taking the time to have the conversation about the program and how important it is and how it would get somebody into treatment. That to me says that's beyond collaboration. That is above and beyond. How exciting.
It is. No, and that's going on even beyond. I don't even see half the work where that's going, but in cases where either somebody has continued to break laws, those are the cases that I'm seeing, people that have not really responded to traditional interventions. I think we all want the same thing, right? We don't want a reason for this court to exist. I mean, that would be the ideal. But, sometimes there are public safety or even safety of the individual themselves, health and safety issues for themselves, that when the systems do have to get involved, it's great that we all support each other's programs. And I'm not at all surprised by the going above and beyond that we're seeing from our officers, because that's been my experience, with the 3 years that we've been here. We're all trying to find solutions. We have a justice coordinating group that meets quarterly within the city, and these are some of the conversations we're having. Interrelated systems. How can we support one another's programs? And this is just one example of that, for sure.
And the work that we do around the state, I've noticed that way of looking at the problem makes such a huge difference in successful programs when different stakeholders come together and say, how do we going to come together to solve this problem together? and really looking at solving the problem versus looking at each other as the problem, right?
Right.
So it's that rowing in the same direction, really being invested in success and how we're going to do it together. And it sounds like Beaverton and the collaboration that you have going on, that you are definitely doing that.
Absolutely. And it's, like I said, supported from the entire city leadership. I think it speaks to some of that criminal justice reform that we've been talking about for years. My hope would be 10 years from now, we're not having this conversation because maybe there's no need for a behavioral health court because those individuals have maybe a civil system that they're entering instead of criminal justice system. I mean, there's still a lot of work to be done. There's no doubt. In the meantime, with the system that we have now, I think when there's criminal justice involvement, this is definitely the way to go for some individuals who are responsive and want these services that we're willing to support and connecting them with.
When we're looking at the intercept work, where we can intervene throughout someone's journey through the system, I'm really enjoying hearing about this programming at the municipal court level. Because humans are so complex, and with every case, it's a combination of what that person is, with the barriers in their personal life, as well as their behavioral health concerns and the criminogenic pieces of it. There needs to be different points where we intercede, right? Like there isn't going to be one place that this one magic thing that will happen where then we will divert everybody. Like that doesn't make any sense. But I love hearing about at the municipal court level, really investing in interceding and diverting at that level before it ends up at a circuit court level. I know it's still pretty soon. Do you have any preliminary, I know your failure to appear rate has gone down quite a bit, which says a ton. Do you have any preliminary recidivism rates that you've been able to look at?
I don't have that. We've only had it the 1 year, and that's definitely going to be over the next year. We're going to try to develop that. I can tell you that anecdotally, we have kind of the top 10 frequent defendants. And since the liaison came on board, I have not seen those individuals as frequently. I mean, I don't want to say I've never seen them, but anecdotally, I would say that the highest utilizer defendants of the criminal justice system, they do not seem to be entering as much. I can tell you that for one of the individuals that I think at one point had like 20 cases in a year with us, we were all able to get them into the civil system, which is a great alternative to the criminal justice system if the civil system can meet their needs. Haven't seen that individual since. I hear reports that that individual is doing the best they've done in years. It's the best they've ever seen her. But again, I don't have that data. It's just kind of anecdotally.
This is an ongoing conversation that, was it 5 years ago when I was at the aid and assist liaison position at the health authority? We've been having this conversation about how to move folks from the forensic track to the civil track for a really long time, and the difficulty in that.
Right.
So I was wondering if you could chat about that a little bit. It sounds like you did it successfully, which is very exciting, but I was curious if you could chat about that a little bit around what that looks like at your court and what kind of barriers you come up against and how you solve some of those.
So the vast majority of our defendants are committing low-level, what most would consider non-dangerous crimes. Sometimes the individual might have a history where they're dangerous or they could be dangerous, especially if their illness is active or there's certain triggers. But for the most part, usually defendants in front of me would never meet civil commitment criteria. So when I say the civil system, really, I'm talking much broader than that. It's unrealistic to think that we're going to be able to shift these misdemeanor defendants into a civil commitment, because the reality is they just won't meet the criteria, the imminent danger criteria. What this liaison position is doing, though, is connecting these defendants to the county resources, getting them properly assessed as far as the level of care, and dare I say, advocating and ensuring that, if they have a certain level of care, that they get access to the services that match that level of care. The civil bed system, and you avail yourself to services voluntarily. So when I say civil system, that's sort of what our goal is with some of these individuals. For example, the gentleman that was just arraigned from his hospital bed, he likely is going to meet residential level care. If our liaison can kind of help facilitate that, where he finally has stable housing and somebody assisting him with his daily needs, we're probably not going to see him on the street committing the various crimes that he's been doing in the past. And so that's really what, when I say civil, that's primarily what I'm talking about. Now, there has been on rare occasion that somebody does meet civil commitment criteria. In that case, muni judges can initiate civil commitment, and then there will be an investigation, and then it punts to a circuit court judge to decide whether to actually commit them or not. That's where I, in the past, have had kind of, again, the collaboration or communication with circuit court to maybe give them a heads up that, this is coming their way. But I think just getting people who voluntarily want to access the civil system is one of the goals that we're trying to do at our level as well.
I'm so glad to hear about how you're looking at having the liaison advocate and help someone to get into services where they meet medical necessity,
right,
where they meet the level of care, is so important and an important step that you are doing.
Right. And most of these individuals, in the past, we had no behavioral health court. I mean, they did it without any court intervention. It was strictly the liaison sort of connecting the individual with the services. And then I think there's also a systems coordination that has to be done at county, right, where there's kind of that ascertaining level of care and whatnot. That all kind of goes behind the scenes. But I think it's a myth to think that many of these individuals like living on the street and that they won't voluntarily improve their life. I mean, that just has not been my experience. I think that many of these individuals are very concerned about any criminal justice system based on their previous experiences. I mean, individuals with mental illness are more likely to be held in jail pre-trial because they don't have a permanent address. They are disorganized. They have a high failure to appear rate. And so there's a lot of trust issues that I think as a system we're going to have to change in the minds of the individuals. But, I would like to see every court have a clinician on staff. I mean, we all know the numbers of individuals in our jails and prisons with mental illness. I think it's over 50%. And why we don't have a clinician sort of assisting and facilitating medical care is beyond me. This should be a standard in my mind.
I think that the more that people hear about your program, probably the more questions that you're going to get about your program and how to get it started and what you've accomplished with it. Because I know that even in Washington County, looking at the circuit court, one of the goals is to be able to have a liaison position at the circuit court level as well as at the municipal court level.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, because we want, another lens I'm looking at as the presiding judge is we want our Washington County residents to have the same access to services. We want a defendant who walks into circuit court for disorderly conduct have the same access to services as somebody walking into Beaverton Municipal Court. And I think, having as much as we possibly can parallel systems levels that playing field. I hope to see that. I fully recognize that this takes resources, and the reality is that in our experience alone, I mean, strictly from a financial benefit, failure to appear of defendants costs money. There's the cost to process the warrant, the cost to house the person in jail if they end up getting picked up on the warrant, the cost with the manpower to hold these hearings and not close out a case. So there's kind of efficiency argument to do whatever you can to resolve cases in a timely manner that also meets that long-term goal of public safety. But then the reality is we're also improving the lives of these individuals by supporting them and getting access to the care that they need. And that's certainly, I think, the more important benefit of having this liaison type model. But again, I know that the county is addressing the intersection of criminal justice in many different ways, many different programs. This is just kind of one part of the piece that I think we're really, really seeing benefits. The feedback I'm getting too from attorneys, for example, particularly defense attorneys, is, it's great to have a clinician to sort of bounce ideas off, to ask for Whitney's advice on what would be good probation terms that would allow this person to be successful, or what does this defendant need? What would reduce their chances that they would end up in the criminal justice system again? And so kind of relying on that expertise to advise the attorneys on how to resolve cases, I think is great. We're only in year one. I hope to have some of that recidivism data maybe by next year at year's end.
I look forward to hearing about that data. What really highlights for me when I hear about your program is not only does it financially make sense with how expensive the failure to appear warrant is for the system and the difference it makes for that individual, which is the most important piece, but also because of the difference it makes to that individual and that person getting the services and support and treatment they need, it also improves public safety significantly, right? Because that person
Mm-hmm.
is no longer engaging in the behaviors that was bringing them to the community court to begin with.
Right.
And that's the piece I think sometimes that gets lost, is that this in the long run is better for public safety than the traditional route because you're addressing the needs to keep that person from coming back. Instead of
Right.
just going through the traditional system where we're doing failure to appear, so the person isn't appearing, so you do more warrants and failures to appear, and they end up in jail. And then it's just continuing the cycle versus meeting someone in a different way and addressing what is bringing them into the system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I still, like I said, I still think there's work to be done. I can tell you that one of my goals is to get peer support specialists services available to anyone who walks through our courthouse doors. I think particularly with our behavioral health court, where I'm seeing a lot of guardedness from defendants, a lot of hesitancy about trusting the court, trusting their attorney, trusting the liaison. I really think peer support specialists in the courthouse being available right there, just the way Whitney is, having that available, I think really would also make a difference in these individuals' lives. So, like I said, more work to be done. That's sort of one of my goals over the next year, is to get that added to our behavioral health team. But in the short term, I think we're doing okay with our liaison and whatnot.
Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful addition to your program, which is already quite impressive, adding a peer support specialist. Because sometimes, folks, it's easier for them to talk to a peer.
Right.
And we can, as professionals, tell somebody the benefits of engaging, but it doesn't really hit like it would unless it's someone that has experienced it before. And I think we all can relate to that in a way when we think about our everyday lives and we think about problems that we're having either at work or somewhere else. If it's someone that has gone through it and that you can talk to about it, that may convince you to do it differently than it would be somebody that you see as their job is to convince you to do it. So that can be a very different kind of conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think just the nature of mental illness, there's those barriers, right? There's paranoia, there's confusion, there's disorganization. So I think sort of having somebody who, has that same experience and that they've come out on the other end is something that I think potentially could assist our defendants here.
Absolutely. Another layer of barriers to treatment, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. In the time we have left, what takeaway message would you like the listening audience to have around the Beaverton Municipal Court or intervening early? What are your thoughts?
Well, for our clinicians and workers in the mental health and substance use systems or communities, know that judges and attorneys want your input. More communication is better. More information is better. If that's something that you think would help or you have authorization to share with judges. I mean, I go to conferences typically twice a year. I meet many judges frequently. We all want the same thing. We all want to minimize further trauma to individuals. We want to make sure that our systems are addressing what they need to address, and we want to make sure that we have systems that are in place that don't necessarily force a criminal case in order to get someone services. So I think that we're doing the best we can with the limited resources that we have. And some of the great work we're doing doesn't cost any money. It's just about communication and new ideas and thinking outside the box and be willing to share those ideas with one another. So I would encourage that communication in any of the systems that you might be working with. I have yet to meet a judge who doesn't want to address these issues. And we hope to make incremental changes that really improve some of these individuals' lives and hopefully prevent future cases from coming down the criminal justice system. I also want to just share that my experiences based on our specialty courts and even our regular cases, recovery is happening and your work is appreciative by everyone in the court system and the criminal justice system. And while some of the statistics are dire and there's definitely room for improvement, I think we're all making some great advancements than, say, 10 years ago. And so I hope that we can all kind of keep up that momentum and continue to grow and expand these programs that seem to be working well.
In Oregon, it seems like we've made great strides in the last 10, 15 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, having multidisciplinary committees, like for example, within the city, we have a justice coordinating committee. So it's made up of police, defense attorney, prosecutors in our system, and our mental health staff, and also jails invited to the JCC. Having a forum where all of the players involved can raise areas that might need to be improved or talk about what's working, what's not working. All of that I think is important to continue on. And my experience is that if you say, hey, look, this is what I want to do, I want to improve communication between all of our different departments or agencies, people are more than willing to do it. I encourage anyone who tends to be interested in lead the charge on that, because it doesn't just have to be judges who can facilitate these changes. It can absolutely come from all levels and all systems.
So recovery is definitely possible and communication is key. We all want the same thing.
Right, absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for your time today, Judge Britton. I appreciate you joining me and our conversation. I look forward to further conversations with you and hearing about the recidivism rates when that comes out. Thank you so much, Judge Britton, Beaverton Municipal Court presiding judge.
Wonderful. Glad to be here.
The Center Collaborative is a production of the Oregon Center on Behavioral Health and Justice Integration, a specialized division of Greater Oregon Behavioral Health Incorporated. It is produced by me, Chris Thomas, with production assistance from Patrick Kennedy. Music by Patrick Mulvihill and Patrick Kennedy. Subscribe to the Center Perspective using your favorite app. To learn more about criminal justice and behavioral health in Oregon, visit the Center's website at ocbhji.org. You can also find us on Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Please reach out to us. Join us next time as we chat with the experts about programs and partnerships at work within this complex and yet compelling field.